My name is Helen Whitmore, and I'm 65 years old. I've lived in Lincoln, Nebraska, my entire life. After my husband, Paul, passed away 7 years ago, this little house became both my comfort and my prison. The walls carry his laughter, our children's tiny footprints, and the scent of coffee he used to make every morning before sunrise. I still find his mug sitting in the cupboard, a faded blue one that says, "World's Best Dad." Some days, I take it out and hold it just to remember that warmth. Life, after losing him, slowed down. I fill my days watering my garden, knitting for the church charity, and volunteering at the local clinic a few hours a week. But when the evening comes, when the house gets quiet and the sun starts setting beyond the cornfields, that's when the loneliness creeps in. That's when I start scrolling through my phone, waiting for a message that never comes. My daughter Rachel and I used to be inseparable. She was my pride, smart, creative, independent. She loved painting as a child. I used to sit beside her while she drew colourful skies, her little tongue sticking out in concentration. She would always say, "Mum, one day I'll design homes where every room feels like a hug." She did become an interior designer in Phoenix, but somewhere along the way, the warmth in her voice faded. Calls became shorter. Messages became fewer. After her wedding, she stopped calling completely unless it was Christmas or my birthday, and even then, it felt like an obligation, not love. My son, Aaron, still checks on me. He's a firefighter in Kansas City, brave like his father, with a heart that hasn't hardened. He visits when he can, but even he has his life, his shifts, his world. I never wanted to be the kind of mother who made her children feel guilty for living their own lives. But I guess no matter how old your children get, the need to feel wanted never goes away. Most nights, I sit by the kitchen window, looking at the streetlights and thinking about Rachel. I wonder if she ever thinks about me while buying groceries or folding her baby's clothes. I imagine her belly growing, her smile softening, her hands cradling the life inside her. I picture the moment she'll become a mother and understand what it means to love someone beyond reason, the way I loved her. But life isn't a movie. Sometimes love gets buried under pride, misunderstandings, or just distance. I never thought mine would. Yet deep down, I always believed. A mother and a daughter can never be truly apart. The bond may get quiet, but it never dies. That belief was the only thing keeping me going, though I didn't realize then how painfully it would be tested. That's where my story begins. In a small, quiet house in Nebraska, with a mother waiting for her daughter's call that never came. Rachel hadn't visited me in almost 3 years. The last time I saw her was when her father's headstone was unveiled. She stood beside me, stiff and silent, her husband's arm around her waist, her eyes avoiding mine. I could tell she was uncomfortable, maybe because grief was messy and she'd always preferred things neat. After that day, she stopped answering my calls as often. I'd leave voicemails like, "Hi, sweetheart, just checking in. Hope you're eating well." She'd reply days later with a short text, "Busy week, Mum. Love you." At first, I told myself it was normal. People get busy. Work, relationships, life. They all take time. But deep down, I knew something was broken. I replayed every conversation, every disagreement, every moment that could have created distance. Maybe it was the day I told her I didn't trust her husband completely. Or maybe when I told her she seemed too tired and needed rest, she took it as criticism. It's strange how love, when misunderstood, can turn into a wall between two hearts. I tried reaching out through letters, real paper letters, because I believed handwriting carried emotion better than pixels on a screen. I wrote about my garden, about Aaron's new promotion, about how proud I was that she was building her dream business. But I never got a reply. I imagined her opening the letters, reading them quickly, then tucking them away in a drawer labeled later. Sometimes I'd see her posts online, smiling with her friends, decorating rooms, traveling for work. I'd leave little heart emojis or comments like, "So proud of you, honey." But she never responded. The silence grew heavier each time. It's the kind of silence that doesn't just sit in the air, it seeps into your bones. I would tell myself, she still loves me. She's just different now. But one night, while I was knitting by the fire, Aaron called and mentioned casually, "Rachel told me she's expecting." My needles froze midair. My baby was going to have a baby, and I found out from someone else. I smiled through the phone, congratulated him, and said, "That's wonderful." But when I hung up, I cried for hours. I wanted to believe she would tell me when the time was right, that she'd call and say, "Mum, I want you here when the baby comes." That hope became my only comfort. But as months passed and my phone stayed silent, I started realizing that maybe I wasn't part of her new life anymore. And yet, even with that heartbreak, I never stopped loving her. Because that's the thing about mothers. No matter how much the world changes, our hearts don't know how to let go. It was a chilly Sunday morning in late February when I found out. I was sitting at my kitchen table, sipping coffee, scrolling through Facebook, a habit I picked up just to feel connected. As I scrolled, I saw her name pop up, Rachel Whitmore. Feeling excited? My heart skipped. I clicked it instantly. There she was, in a beautiful pink dress, standing beneath a floral archway, her hands gently resting on her belly. The caption read, "Can't wait to celebrate this new chapter with my favorite people next week." Baby shower, new beginnings, favorite people. I read that phrase over and over until the words blurred. My hands started trembling. I wasn't tagged. I checked the comments, dozens of hearts and congratulations, friends saying, "See you at the party?" My stomach tightened. I wasn't one of those people. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. My throat felt dry, my heart heavy. I whispered to myself, maybe it's a small gathering, maybe she's planning to surprise me, but that voice inside me, the one that had grown used to disappointment, whispered louder. "She didn't forget, Helen. She left you out." I spent the entire day trying to convince myself otherwise. I checked my messages, my email, my mailbox. Nothing. Not a word from Rachel. I even opened my spam folder just in case. By evening, the truth settled in like winter frost. I wasn't invited to my own daughter's baby shower. That night, I sat in the living room, clutching a small baby blanket I'd been knitting for months. It was white with tiny pink edges, soft and delicate, just like the ones I used to make for Rachel when she was little. I stared at it and whispered, "You'll still have this, my grandchild." Somehow, the silence that followed felt suffocating. I thought about calling Rachel, about asking her why, but my pride stopped me. What if she said she didn't want me there? What if hearing it out loud shattered what little I had left? So instead, I cried quietly, hiding my face in that unfinished blanket, feeling every stitch tighten around my chest. By midnight, I made a decision, not out of anger, but love. I couldn't let my daughter believe that distance could erase motherhood. I would go to Phoenix. I would show up, not to embarrass her, but to remind her. I still cared, and I still belonged in her life. The next morning, I packed my old beige suitcase, the same one Paul and I used when we took road trips across the Midwest. I folded the baby blanket carefully inside, along with a small silver rattle Paul had bought years ago for our first grandchild, he'd said with a smile. I never thought I'd be carrying it alone. I wrote Aaron a note, telling him I was going on a short trip, just to clear my head. I didn't want him to worry or talk me out of it. I filled my car's tank, checked the oil, and sat behind the wheel for a long minute, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. 600 miles. It sounded like forever, but love doesn't measure distance. It measures hope. I started the engine, took a deep breath, and said softly, "Paul, if you can hear me, guide me safely. I need to see our little girl." The first few hours were peaceful. The Nebraska fields stretched endlessly, bathed in golden morning light. I played old songs on the radio, the one Rachel used to sing along to when she was little. I remembered her sitting in the back seat, braiding her doll's hair, laughing whenever we hit a bump. I smiled through my tears. As the miles passed, the weather changed. Rain drizzled over the windshield, blurring the road ahead. But I kept driving. I stopped at small diners, grabbed coffee, and kept thinking about what I would say when I saw her. "I missed you. You look beautiful. I love you." Not once did I think she wouldn't want to see me. I imagined walking into the hall, surprising her, watching her face light up like it used to when she was a child. I imagined her hugging me, whispering, "Mum, I can't believe you came." That thought alone made the journey easier. Every mile was a memory, every memory a heartbeat. And in that moment, I didn't feel 65 or lonely. I felt like a mother on a mission, holding on to the one thing that had always defined her: love. By the time I crossed into Arizona, the air had changed. Warmer, lighter, filled with the scent of desert and dust. My back ached from the long drive, but my heart was strangely calm. I stopped at a rest area and opened my notebook, reading an old poem Paul had written for me years ago. "Some roads are long, but love always knows the way home." I smiled, tracing the words with my fingers. It felt like he was traveling with me. I could almost hear his voice saying, "You're doing the right thing, Helen." The drive gave me time to think about everything. The years that had slipped away, the birthdays missed, the conversations left unfinished. I realized how quickly love can fade when no one waters it. Maybe Rachel thought I was too controlling. Maybe I wasn't as easy to talk to as I believed. Mothers don't always notice the cracks forming until they're too wide to cross. At one gas station, a young attendant saw the baby blanket folded in my passenger seat. He smiled and said, "That's for your grandbaby?" I nodded. "She's lucky," he said kindly. That one sentence made me tear up. For the first time in months, I felt seen. The final stretch of highway into Phoenix was lined with palm trees, swaying under the afternoon sun. I could see the skyline from a distance, shimmering with glass towers and promise. My heart pounded faster with every exit sign. I was close, so close to the moment I'd been imagining for months. I checked the address I had found online, a hotel ballroom near downtown. I parked the car, looked in the mirror, fixed my hair, and whispered, "You've got this, Helen. Be kind, be calm, be brave." I took the gift bag from the back seat, the one holding the baby blanket and rattle. My hands trembled as I stepped out of the car. The sound of laughter drifted from the open doors. Rachel's laughter. My throat tightened. I took a deep breath, stood tall, and walked toward the sound, believing that love would open the door that distance had closed. When Helen finally reached Phoenix, the sky was melting into a golden orange, the kind of sunset that reminded her of her wedding day. Soft, hopeful, full of promises. She checked into a small motel on the outskirts of town, the kind with flickering neon lights and a faint smell of coffee and dust in the air. She was exhausted, but her heart beat faster with every thought of Rachel. The next morning, she woke early, put on her pale blue dress, the same one Rachel had once said made her look like spring, and carefully packed the baby blanket and silver rattle into a gift bag with a pink bow. Her hands trembled as she wrote, "For my grandbaby, with all my love, Mom," on the card. When she reached the event hall, laughter and music spilled into the parking lot. The building was draped in pastel decorations, balloons shaped like hearts, and a banner that read, "Welcome, baby Harper." Helen smiled through tears. Harper, she whispered to herself. What a lovely name. She walked in quietly, clutching the gift close, trying not to disturb anyone. For a moment, she stood near the doorway, hidden behind a cluster of guests, watching her daughter laugh with her friends. Rachel looked radiant, surrounded by people, holding a glass of lemonade and glowing with happiness. Helen's heart swelled with pride. This was her daughter, the same little girl who used to hide behind her legs on the first day of kindergarten, who once made her promise never to miss her big moments. And now, here she, kindergarten, who once made her promise never to miss her big moments. And now here she was, ready to become a mother herself. Helen imagined Rachel spotting her, smiling, running up to hug her, saying, "Mom, you came." She rehearsed it in her mind, like a scene from the movies she loved. She even practiced what she'd say. "I couldn't miss your special day, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, weaving through the crowd until she stood just a few feet away. Rachel turned, their eyes met, and in that instant, everything froze. Rachel's smile faltered. The warmth drained from her face as if someone had flipped a switch. "Mum?" she said softly at first, then louder, her tone sharp. The chatter around them dimmed. A few guests turned to see what was happening. "What are you doing here?" Rachel asked, her voice tight. Helen blinked, confused by the coldness in her daughter's tone. "Sweetheart, I wanted to surprise you," she said, offering the gift bag with trembling hands. "I didn't see an invitation, but I thought maybe—" "You thought wrong, Mom," Rachel interrupted, glancing nervously at her friends. "This is not the time or place. You can't just show up like this." A woman beside Rachel, probably one of her close friends, whispered something into her ear. Rachel nodded, her expression hardening. Helen's throat tightened. The laughter, the chatter, the music. It all felt 1,000 miles away now. "I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable," Helen said softly, her eyes glistening. "I just wanted to be part of your happiness." Rachel's husband appeared beside her, awkwardly rubbing the back of his neck. "Helen, maybe you should go for now," he said gently but firmly. Rachel's really stressed. This isn't a good moment. The crowd watched silently as Helen lowered her gaze. "I drove 600 miles, she whispered, almost to herself. Rachel didn't respond. The silence cut deeper than any words could. A man in a security uniform approached her, his voice kind but professional. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but we've been asked to escort you out." Helen froze. Her heart sank like a stone. Around her, whispers rippled through the guests. Some looked away, others pretended to check their phones. No one stepped forward. Helen nodded slowly. "It's okay," she said, her voice trembling. She looked at Rachel one last time. Her daughter stood still, her arms crossed, eyes glassy but unmoving. Helen turned and walked toward the exit, clutching the pink gift bag like a lifeline. As she stepped outside, the cool desert air hit her face. She sat down on a bench near the parking lot, the laughter from inside echoing faintly through the walls. She opened the bag and pulled out the tiny blanket she'd spent months crocheting, every loop woven with love and memory. It felt warm in her lap, even as tears streamed down her face. "I just wanted to see you happy," she whispered into the night. Then she folded the blanket neatly, placed it back in the bag, and walked away under the soft hum of the streetlights, her heart heavier than her suitcase. That night, Helen checked into a cheap roadside motel off the highway. The walls were thin, the light flickered, and the clock ticked louder than usual. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the silver rattle lying on the nightstand. Her mind replayed the moment Rachel's voice cracked with anger, the sound of people whispering, the sting of humiliation. She tried to eat, but the food turned to dust in her mouth. Finally, she took out her old photo album from her bag, a habit she never broke during lonely nights. The first picture was of Rachel as a baby, wrapped in a pink blanket, smiling toothlessly at the camera. Next to it was a photo of her husband, Mark, holding Rachel on his shoulders, both laughing in the summer sun. Helen traced their faces with her fingers, her chest aching. "You'd know what to say," she whispered to the photo of her late husband. "You'd tell me to keep loving her anyway." Outside, thunder rolled. Helen opened the window and let the rain mist her face. "I just wanted to be there for her," she said softly. "Why wasn't that enough?" She cried until her body gave out, her tears mixing with the rhythm of the storm. In that small, dimly lit room, she felt like the world had forgotten her, except for one person she hoped still remembered. A few days later, there was a knock at Helen's door. When she opened it, Aaron stood there, tall, tired, and holding 2 coffees. "Hey, Mom," he said, forcing a small smile. Helen's eyes widened. "Aaron, how did you—" "Rachel called me," he said, walking in. "Told me what happened. I wanted to see if you were okay." Helen looked down, ashamed. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. I just wanted to see her. I didn't think it would end like this." Aaron sat beside her and handed her a cup. "Mum, you've spent your whole life giving. Maybe it's time she sees that love isn't something she can just shut the door on." Helen's eyes welled up. "I don't want to hurt her. I just miss her. Always said words can heal, right? Maybe it's time they do." That night, Helen opened her old laptop, the one she barely used since Mark's death. The cursor blinked on an empty page. Slowly, she typed the first words, "To the daughter who forgot her mother." Helen sat by the dim light of her old table lamp, the one that had been with her since her nursing days. The glow was soft, comforting, the kind of light that made loneliness bearable. She placed her fingers on the keyboard and stared at the blank screen. The cursor blinked, steady, patient, waiting for her heart to spill out. She began typing slowly. "To the daughter who forgot her mother?" The words came out heavy, like tears she hadn't cried yet. She wrote about the nights she stayed awake worrying about Rachel's asthma as a child, about how she skipped her own anniversary dinner to attend Rachel's middle school recital, and how she stood at the back of the church on Rachel's wedding day, proud and crying at the same time. She wrote about love, not the easy kind that comes with laughter and gifts, but the kind that waits, forgives, and keeps showing up even when the door is closed. She confessed how lonely life had become since Mark passed away, and how she still set 2 plates at the dinner table sometimes, out of habit. "I didn't come to embarrass you," she typed. "I came because I miss being part of your life. I came because I thought maybe, just maybe, you'd still want your mom there when life gave you something beautiful." Her fingers trembled. The screen blurred through her tears. She read it 3 times before pressing post on her Facebook page, unsure if anyone would even notice. Then she closed the laptop, turned off the lamp, and sat in silence, her heart lighter but fragile. That night, she dreamt of Rachel as a little girl running into her arms, saying, "Mum, look what I made." The dream felt so real that when Helen woke up, she reached for her daughter's hand, but found only the cold sheet beside her. By morning, Helen's phone was buzzing non-stop. At first, she thought it was spam. Then she noticed hundreds of notifications from Facebook, comments, messages, shares. Her letter had exploded across social media overnight. "Your words broke me. I called my mom today because of you. You reminded me what unconditional love looks like." Helen scrolled through the messages, her heart racing. She couldn't believe it. People from across the country, even other widowed mothers, were writing to her, thanking her for giving voice to their pain. Local news pages began sharing her post. A journalist even messaged her, asking if she'd be open to an interview. She sat there in her little kitchen, wearing her faded robe, coffee growing cold on the counter, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel invisible. She wasn't just a lonely mother anymore. She was heard. Then she noticed a name in the comment section that made her freeze. Rachel Whitmore liked this post. Helen's hands went cold. Her eyes filled instantly. She read the name again, making sure it wasn't imagination. Then she whispered softly. She saw it. Her voice cracked, breaking into a half laugh, half sob. She didn't expect an apology or a phone call. Just knowing her daughter had read her words was enough to fill the empty corners of her heart. Still, deep inside, a flicker of hope came alive. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it was just the beginning of something new. Across the city, Rachel sat in her living room, her phone clutched in her trembling hand. She'd read the letter 3 times. Every word hit her like a wave. The memories came flooding back. Her mum staying up all night during storms because Rachel was scared. Her mum packing lunches with tiny notes that said, "You're my sunshine." Rachel had convinced herself that keeping her distance made life easier, cleaner, less emotional. Her husband had often told her, "Your mum's too intense, you need boundaries." And Rachel believed it. She believed that silence was maturity. But now, reading that letter, she saw what her silence had really been: punishment. When she got to the line, "I thought maybe you'd still want your mom there when life gave you something beautiful." She broke down completely. Her chest heaved as guilt washed over her. She had taken her mother's love, that endless, patient love, and turned it into shame. Her husband walked in and froze. "Rachel, what's wrong?" She handed him the phone. "She wrote this about me." He read it quietly, then said softly, "Maybe it's time to go see her." Rachel nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how to face her." He placed his hand on her shoulder. "You start by knocking on her door." 3 days later, Helen was watering her porch plants when she heard a car pull up. She didn't look up at first. She was used to delivery vans and neighborhood kids, but then she heard a voice she hadn't heard in months. "Mum?" Helen turned around. Rachel stood there, her belly round, her eyes red from crying. For a moment, both froze, time hanging between them like a fragile thread. Then Rachel ran forward and threw her arms around her mother. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed into Helen's shoulder. "I don't know what I was thinking." "I was wrong. You didn't deserve any of it." Helen held her close, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. "Shh, baby. You're home now. That's all that matters." Rachel pulled back slightly and reached into her purse. She took out a small framed photo, an ultrasound image. "I wanted you to have this," she said. "That's your granddaughter. And she's going to know you. I promise." Helen's hands shook as she took the frame. "She's beautiful," she whispered. The two of them stood there in the sunlight, the sound of birds and wind wrapping around them like a quiet blessing. That evening, they sat together on the porch, drinking tea and talking for hours. The distance, the anger, the silence, all of it melted under the warmth of forgiveness. Rachel rested her head on Helen's shoulder, just like she used to as a child. "Mum," Rachel said softly, "how did you still love me after everything?" Helen smiled faintly. "Because love doesn't disappear, honey. It just waits to be remembered." The porch light flickered as night settled in, but for the first time in a long while, Helen didn't feel alone. She felt complete. Not because everything was perfect, but because love had found its way back home. And as she watched Rachel drive away later that night, Helen whispered a silent prayer, not of sorrow, but of gratitude. Because even broken hearts can heal when forgiveness takes the wheel. Life lesson. Never let ego or pride stand between you and the ones who truly love you. Time is fragile, but love, if you choose it, can rebuild everything. CTA for YouTube. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe for more real-life emotional stories that remind us love always deserves a second chance.